What is going on, everyone? JP MMA here, back with a brand new video. Just wanted to hop on here quick and go over some matchups that I really like after last week's fight night, Edwards versus Brady. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first matchup we're going to be going over is Marcin Tybura. He got a very, very close decision win versus Mick Parkin. Tybura's been a guy that hasn't really gone up the rankings or down the rankings too much in the last few years. He's kind of stayed in that 10 to 15 range, beating the guys that he should be beating and losing to the top division guys. So he hasn't moved much. So in that case, I'm going to match him up against somebody that's in the same area as him in the 10 to 15 range, and that's going to be Derek Lewis. These guys did fight back in 2018. Lewis did win by a knockout. So it's been enough. I don't really like you doing rematches for matchups to make, but when it makes sense, it makes sense, and I'll definitely get hyped about this one. This is a very fun matchup between Lewis and Tybura. Like I said, they did rematch back in 2018. It's been 8 years since then, so that's plenty of time for them to get back at it. In the same rank range, Lewis hasn't really been fighting much. Fought once last year, is actually coming off a win. So both guys are coming off of a win. Tybura beating a pretty good prospect in Mick Parkin. So that'll be interesting to see who wins that one. Not really too important for the division's future. Both these guys aren't going to be in the top 5. So we don't have to worry about that. It's more of just a fun and entertaining matchup. Next up, we got the loser of that fight, Mick Parkin. Interesting to see the judges give it to Tybura. You kind of would have expected the hometown judges to give it to the hometown guy, but Mick Parkin loses his O on fight night versus Tybura, and I want to match him up versus Tai Tuivasa. We're looking at the rankings here. Everybody outside of the top 15 at heavyweight is really not very good. I'm looking at the top 50 world rankings. Half these guys aren't even in UFC they have outside of the top 15. Martin Buday could be a better option. The Tafas aren't great. They've been getting loss after loss. And those types of matchups aren't as exciting. So I'm going to put him up against a guy that is somehow, some way, number 10 in the division, Tai Tuivasa. Ty's on a 5 or 6 fight losing streak, most of them coming by finish. I don't know how he's 10 in the division. He probably should be unranked at this point. So it's a bump up. He's fighting, somebody higher in the rankings than him. But in my opinion, Mick Parkin should win that fight. Tai Tuivasa, I mean, his head's not in it. His body isn't in it. Who knows how many fights we'll see out of that guy, because it just doesn't look like he's taking his career seriously at this point. Plus his loss streak. I'm going to match up Parkin versus Tai Tuivasa. Next fight, we're going over the Loner Kavanagh versus Felipe Dos Santos fight. This is a pretty fun fight. Loner Kavanagh looking to be a nice prospect in the flyweight division. And we definitely need some prospects in this division. It's a little bit top heavy with your Morenos and your Ravals. You can throw Tyra in there, but as we know, Pantoja is having a hard time trying to find a matchup that's going to be competitive for him. We keep seeing a bunch of rematches and Ravals, Moreno type matchups. Pantoja's beating everybody in this division, so we're going to need a nice prospect to get excited about, and that could be Loner Kavanagh. I'm going to be matching him up against Alessandro Costa. He's a Brazilian. He's 14-4 in the flyweight division. There he is. UFC record only 2-2, but he went to a decision with Steve Erceg. Is coming off a knockout win. I didn't want to give Loner Kavanagh too much of a bump up because he is 2-0 in the UFC, one on the Contender Series. His fights have been pretty close. They've been competitive. He's taken a little bit of damage, and the output hasn't been that crazy. So I'm not like crazy impressed by him. It's not like he's on the Fighting Nerds just knocking everybody out. So yep, I'm gonna give him Alessandro Costa, a guy not really near the top 15, but definitely a serviceable fighter in the UFC, and nobody that you can hang your head about. And this fight should probably be around pick 'em odds too, in my opinion. So that's kind of what we're looking for when we're matching people up. As for Felipe Dos Santos, he's not doing too great in the UFC. I think he's 1-3 at this point now. I'm gonna match him up against a guy that recently got a loss at UFC 313, and that's Ray Saruya. Not impressed by Ray Saruya in that last fight versus Joshua Van. Van's a great fighter. I'm one of his biggest glazers. So, it's a decision loss to Van, but I mean, he looked like Kron Gracie out there shooting every possible second he could. Every time he got hit on the feet, he was immediately shooting at the legs. Not good to see. He gets a win over Carlos Hernandez in his debut, which was basically a grappling match. That was pretty crazy to see, but heavy grappler, needs to work on his striking. I'm going to match him up against Felipe Dos Santos here. Both very young in the UFC. Both have a little bit of learning and experience to gain before I think they can really take off in the division. Next person we're going to go up with is Jai Herbert. So he had a boring loss to Chris Padilla, kind of a snoozer. I'm going to be matching him up against Vince Pichel. I honestly don't know who to match up Jai Herbert against, guys. He doesn't really have a good record. He hasn't had any type of win streak in the UFC. He hasn't had multiple wins in a row. It's literally just win-loss. He's had some nice competition for SCM, Ludovic Klein, Ilya Taporia, Hanato Moicano, but it just doesn't seem like he's that caliber anymore. Any excitement of him as a prospect has been gone for a year or two now, and I'm not really expecting any more crazy success out of Jai Herbert. So Vince Pichel's fighting this week in Mexico City. He's a guy that is going to have a very similar timetable to Jai Herbert. Let's see, where is he? He's here. He's fighting Rafa Garcia. He should lose that fight. Maybe it's honestly a little bit disrespectful to Jai Herbert, but like I said before, I'm not going to match him up against anybody that great. Chris Padilla is good, but he's not all that. And Jai Herbert, especially not landing the output he could have in that fight, it's a little bit disappointing to see. So I'm going to give Jai Herbert kind of a layup here, in my opinion. For the winner of that matchup, Chris Padilla, I'm going to be giving him William Gomis. William Gomis is also on a little bit of a similar timetable to Chris Padilla as well. You can see he fought on the Cap versus Almabayev card. He did lose a very close split decision to Haider Emil, in which he was minus 245 favorite, and a bunch of strikes landed and absorbed in that fight. He has a very low output, one of those guys kind of like Leon Edwards. He's got low output but also doesn't get hit a lot, so that's kind of the trade-off these guys make. And Haider Emil forced the action, forced Gomis to land shots, but also take more than he landed, and that's what got Emil the victory there. Gomis is a solid fighter. He's good defensively. He's never gonna really put himself in danger too much. He's never been KO'd. He's very content with just staying on the outside and striking. Like I said, a little bit like Leon, striking on the outside, not crazy output, and definitely more of the safe approach. But as you can see, he beat Anderson Brito. That was a very close fight. I think, in my opinion, Brito won that, but beat Francis Marshall, a decent little prospect too, in his second UFC fight, and he just took his first UFC loss by split decision. I actually like this guy as a prospect. He's 27 years old as well. Great physique, if that means anything. But yeah, William Gomis, in my opinion, is about 30th, 20 to 30 in the featherweight division. So it is going to be a bump up for Chris Padilla, but I think he deserves that. He's 3-0 in the UFC. So next guy we're going to be going over is Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan got an impressive win versus Jordan Vucenic in last week's fight night. The one that nobody was really expecting. Honestly, this guy's always an underdog, and he keeps on winning. So props to him. Give him credit. He keeps on winning when we doubt him. So as he was plus 225. He gets the second round submission over a nice prospect in Jordan Vucenic, who lost his debut, and we really thought he was going to bounce back versus Chris Duncan, but that was not on Duncan's itinerary. I'm going to give Duncan Elvis Brenner. Elvis Brenner is a dog. If you've heard me talk about him in previous videos, we can bring him up. This guy's a dog. This guy broke Guram Kutalaze in their fight, finished Guram. He has lost 2 in a row, but they're to very, very good prospects in Oralbai and Yoel Alvarez. Alvarez is basically ranked. He's number 16 in the division pretty much right now, and he has a ranked opponent currently lined up for his future. So very, very tough guy. That was the first time he has been finished, was against Yoel Alvarez in his last fight. And most of his fights are very violent wars, and Chris Duncan is also a high finisher, so I think this is just that lightweight fight that is going to be violent, and should be a finish in that fight, so it's another good fight between 2 lightweight prospects. Next, we're going to go over Jordan Vucenic taking the L, 0-2 in the UFC now, losing to Chris Duncan by submission. I'm going to hope that Dana gives him a little bit of a layup, and I'm going to give him Joaquin Silva. Joaquin Silva is just your average UFC Brazilian fighter. He's got a great physique, ton of muscle, could be roided up, has a good amount of fights in the UFC, average record, but if you guys do remember, he fought Arman on short notice, Arman Sukrin minus 1,200, I think it was, and he did catch Arman on the temple, and Arman was doing the chicken dance, so he was able to hurt Arman Saryukin. You could say that was kind of a fluke. Arman ended up finishing him in that fight, took him down, and got the ground and pen TKO. Either way, that does tell us that this guy is dangerous, and he could land a shot on anybody. So with that being said, Jordan Vucenic should win that fight, but we said that last week, and he couldn't get it done, so we're going to hope Jordan Vucenic wins and he keeps his career alive in the UFC. If he falls to 0-3, that really will not be a good look for him or just UK MMA in general, especially with Leon going down. Next fighter, we're going to be going over Kevin Holland. He got a unanimous decision win versus Gunnar Nelson. Pretty weird fight. We expected Nelson to use his grappling. That's what he did. Kevin Holland outstruck him, getting the knockdown, doing a little bit too much on the feet for Gunnar Nelson, gets the win on the scorecards. If you remember my fights to make after UFC 313, I matched up Bruno Ferreira against Kevin Holland. So I'm going to say Kevin Holland should fight Bruno Ferreira. I know Kevin Holland wants to fight at welterweight, but he keeps switching between welterweight and middleweight, so I'm going to be giving him a middleweight matchup here in Bruno Ferreira. Bruno, 100% finish rate, looking to get in the rankings. I think he's kind of deserved a 15 to 20 guy in the middleweight division, and that's right where Kevin Holland is. So I think this is the perfect matchup. As we know, Kevin Holland will fight anybody and everybody. Not always beat them, but he will fight them, so props to him. And I might have to take Bruno Ferreira. It's an interesting stylistic matchup, because, they're both mainly strikers. Ferreira's definitely got that knockout power and a little bit shorter, stockier guy with a shorter reach. So that'll be an interesting striking matchup. And Bruno Ferreira could also use the grappling. So I might have to pick him if that fight gets made. But there's just so many opponents that they can give Kevin Holland at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised that any opponent, maybe Neil Magny, it's always someone around the top 15, top 25 of the rankings. Next up, we got Jan Blachowicz. He loses a very, very close decision. People are crying robbery in this fight versus Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg did outstrike Jan Blachowicz, but it seemed like Jan Blachowicz landed a little bit better shots. Carlos Ulberg kind of just tapping his foot against Jan's leg for a lot of the fight. That seems to be a lot of the strikes that he landed. So pretty controversial, very, very close fight either way. Honestly, I'm a little bit happier that Ulberg won, just so we have another good prospect at light heavyweight. I'm always rooting for the prospects because I want to be hyped for new competition and really See guys that can potentially challenge for the belt. So Olberg is a new face in the division and a new face in the title picture, which is usually what I like to see. Jan Blachowicz is kind of, a little bit older news. He's been in the UFC a long, long time. I love the guy, though. He's a very nice guy. Not that I've ever met him, but a great, great fighter, too. It seems like all of his losses are pretty close in recent memory. So it kind of sucks to see him lose another close decision, but it is what it is. Probably a little bit better for the division's future that Olberg won. So I'm going to be giving Jan Blachowicz the winner of the Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree fight. This fight is coming up in a month's time, so that's going to be a really cool fight night, a really good main event. Hill versus Roundtree. Hill getting back in there pretty quick once again after his loss, so this should be a very violent fight. You would assume a knockout in this fight, and I think either fighter is deserving of a Jan Blachowicz fight, and Jan Blachowicz fighting very little down the rankings. If we take a look, Jamal Hill is actually, Jamal Hill is above him in the rankings. Jamal Hill's 4, Jan Blachowicz is a 5, and you got Khalil Roundtree at 7, so the winner of that fight should be near or in the top 5, where Jan Blachowicz is ranked number 5, so should be a very good fight. Near the rank in the rankings wise, I don't want to see him fight down too much. It's not like Dominic Reyes, Johnny Walker, Krylov are really guys that I want to see him match up with. We could say the Rakic rematch, because Rakic lost on a little bit of an injury, so I was considering that, but I think Jan Blachowicz is too good, and his losses have been too close for him to fight that far down the rankings. So I really like the winner of Hill versus Roundtree for Blachowicz's next opponent. Moving on to the winner of that fight, Carlos Olberg. Looks pretty good. He's very defensively sound, throws usually more output than his opponent, but also has nice knockout power. For Carlos Olberg, I feel like it's a unanimous decision to match him up against Yuri Prochazka. I don't think he's really earned a title fight that much. He's beaten 3 ranked opponents, so in Manyfield, a nice win in Ozdemir. Manyfield in that 10 to 15 range, Ozdemir in that 5 to 10 range, and Blachowicz in that top 5 range. So he's incrementally getting better and better opponents. And at the same time, I don't think Yuri Prochazka really deserves a title shot. With his recent losses, he seems to beat everybody besides Alex Pereira. I want to see him get one more win versus Olberg, and the winner of this matchup, Prochazka versus Olberg, will 100% get a title shot, and will get a well-deserved title shot as well, because Olberg beating Blachowicz, Ozdemir, and then potentially Yuri Prochazka, you cannot deny him at that point with only 1 loss. And then, of course, Yuri with his resume, aside from Alex Pereira. I would love to see Yuri in a title fight. Who wouldn't? So for that co-main event, that's who we're going to be matching those guys up against. For the main event, Leon Edwards takes the L badly, gets dominated by Sean Brady. Fans leaving the arena, terrible look for Leon. Dean Thomas coming out today and saying that Leon just doesn't really have that dog in him. He doesn't really have that fighter mentality like Gaethje Poirier that'll literally fight you anywhere in the street, whatever. He was kind of saying that Leon doesn't really have that mentality, and although he doesn't, he was still that good. So kind of an insult and a compliment at the same time. But I would probably agree with him, to be honest. Leon getting out grappled the way he did, not being able to get up under control. Not a good look for Leon, for a guy who we thought was, one of the best welterweights of all time. Maybe that's not the case anymore. I want to see him versus the winner of next pay-per-view's very electric matchup of Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal. This is going to be a really good fight, as it is a very nice striking matchup. So styles make fights. These guys are both strikers. This ain't going to the ground. And Jeff Neal is the hardest opponent that Carlos Prates has faced in his career by far. He's no slouch. Jeff Neal could honestly win this fight. I don't want to automatically pick Carlos Prates, but again, Prates has powerful hands. He can knock out anybody at this moment in time, it seems like. So I might have to lean Prates in this one, but I want to see Leon face the winner of that. I think the winner of this matchup, especially if it's being Prates, why not give him a big jump up in the rankings? And we could see Prates versus Leon Edwards. Like I said, styles make fights. This is going to be a striking matchup as well. Carlos Prates is definitely not going to take down Leon Edwards. He's not even going to try. He might actually succeed because Leon's grappling looks mad sus at the moment. But yeah, a great striking matchup. Neither guy's going to shoot takedowns. And honestly, you might have to choose Prates. Leon just doesn't look himself. Maybe he was never all that good. Maybe that unbeaten streak kind of fooled us, but Leon versus the upper echelon guys has not been succeeding, unless besides that one fight versus Kamaru Usman. So I want to see Leon face the winner of Neal versus Prates. I think that's a great matchup, but another opponent or two maybe you could put for Leon is Michael Morales if he beats Burns, or that Ian Gary fight, which I was really excited about the thought of that when Leon was champ. I thought that would be a really nice fight, and I would still love to see that Ian Gary fight, but I think Carlos Prates / Jeff Neal would deserve it just a little bit more. Moving on to the winner, domination from Sean Brady versus Leon Edwards. This is also kind of an obvious one, like Carlos Ulberg. We got to put him into a title elimination bout versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. To me, there's really no other people. There's a lot of guys that are closing in on a title fight in the welterweight division. You have JDM fighting for the belt in his next fight, which is a new challenger. You got Joaquin Buckley coming up the rankings, beating Colby, having a great 4-0 year in the division. So he could potentially get a matchup with someone like Kamaru Usman and be one fight away from a title fight. As we know, Ian Gary and Shavkat just fought for a number one contenders fight, and Shavkat has been hurt, so he was supposed to fight Bilal, the champ, for the belt, but that didn't work out, and it seems like Shavkat he's kind of lost his invincibility, so and with him being injured and out a bunch of times, I'd like to see him get another fight before the title fight, and that perfect guy, Sean Brady. I don't think you can deny Sean Brady. That's his best performance versus his toughest competition. So I was saying how impressive that performance was in my recap video, but it was so damn impressive to see that type of grappling, that type of Khabib grappling from Sean Brady in that fight. So I'm really impressed with Sean Brady. I don't want anything less than a title elimination bout for him. And that's going to do it. My predictions for my matchups to make after Edwards versus Brady. Let me know what you guys think of my matchups. If you would change anything about them, leave your matchups down below. I'd be very interested to see them. And that will be it for me.